Oration delivered by Mr. Sidney Rigdon on the 4th of July at Far West, Caldwell County, Missouri, by Sidney Rigdon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by James Bleckley. Friends and fellow citizens, by your request, I'm called upon to address you this day under circumstances novel to myself, and I presume as much so to the rest of you. For however frequently we may have met with our fellow citizens in times past, in the places of our nativity or of our choice, to mingle our feelings with theirs and unite with them in grateful acknowledgments to our divine benefactor on the anniversary of our national existence, but not before have we been assembled by reason of our holy religion, for which cause alone a very large majority of us is here this day. But though our residence here is far from the sepulchres of our fathers and from the lands of our nativity and former choice, and our association here as novel and as strange to ourselves as it could be to any portion of our fellow men, still, we hail the return of the birthday of our liberties with no less feelings of joy and gratitude, nor no less desire for the prosperity and continuance of the fabric of our national government inspires our breasts this day than when we met in the mixed assemblies of all religions as in times past in the lands of our nativity. Nor indeed could it otherwise be. From our infancy, we've been traditionated to believe ours to be the best government in the world. Our fathers, our neighbors, and our associates in life have extolled its excellence to the highest pinnacle of fame in our ears, even before we were capable of judging of its merits for ourselves or able to form an estimate of its worth. As we advanced in life, we heard nothing else from our statesmen and heroes but the perfection and excellence of our political institutions and the superiority of our government over all the governments of the world, whether they existed in former or latter times. It is the government under which we were born and educated, or else we exchanged another for it, with whose form we were not satisfied, and in our hearts gave this the preference, and sought by removal to enjoy its benefits. We've been taught from our cradles to reverence the fathers of the Revolution, and venerate the very urns which contain the ashes of those who sleep, and every feeling of our hearts responds in perfect unison to the precept. Our country and its institutions are written on the tablet of our hearts, as with the blood of the heroes who offered their lives in sacrifice to redeem us from oppression. On its towers the flag of freedom waves and invites the oppressed to enter and find an asylum. Under the safeguard of its constitution, the tyrant's grasp is unfastened, and equal rights and privileges flow to every part of the grand whole. Protected by its laws and defended by its powers, the oppressed and persecuted saint can worship under his own vine and under his own fig tree, and none can molest or make afraid. We've always contemplated it, and do now, as the only true fabric of freedom and bulwark of liberty in the world. Its very existence has taught the civilized world lessons of freedom far surpassing those of a Pitt, a Wilberforce, a Canning, or a Gray, and has cast all their efforts in the shade forever. It has stood and now stands as the arbiter of the world, the judger of the nations, and the rebuker of tyrants. Throughout the world it is this standard of freedom, both civil and religious. By its existence, the fears of the superstitious have been removed, and the pretexts of tyrants have been swept away as a refuge of lies, and the rights of man have been restored, and freedom, both political and religious, have been made to triumph. Our government is known throughout the civilized world as the standard of freedom, civil, religious, and political. By it are the acts of all nations tried, and it serves to expose the frauds, the deceptions, and the crafts of the old world in attempting to pawn upon the people monarchy and aristocracy for republicanism and freedom. So powerful has been its influence that the hand of the oppressor, even in the old world, has been lightened, Tyrants have been made to tremble, and the oppressors of mankind have been filled with fear. Thrones, if they have not been cast down, have been stripped of their terror, and the oppressed subject has been measurably delivered from his bondage. Having been rocked in the cradle of liberty and educated in the school of freedom, all our prejudices and prepossessions are deeply rooted in favor of the superlative excellence of a government from which all our privileges and enjoyments have flown. We are wedded to it by the strongest ties, bound to it by cords as strong as death. To preserve it ought to be our aim in all our pursuits, to maintain its constitution inviolable, its institutions uncorrupted, its laws unviolated, and its orders underranged. There is one thing, in the midst of our political differences, which ought to create feelings of joy and gratitude in every heart, and in the bosom of every well-wisher to mankind, that all parties in politics express the strongest desire to preserve both the Union and the Constitution unimpaired and unbroken, and only differ about the means to accomplish this object, so desirable as expressed by all parties. And while this indeed is the object of the parties in this republic, there's nothing to fear. The prospects for the future will be as flattering as the past. In celebrating this, the anniversary of our independence, all party distinctions should be forgotten. All religious differences should be laid aside. We are members of one common republic, equally dependent on a faithful execution of its laws for our protection in the enjoyment of our civil, political, and religious privileges. All have a common interest in the preservation of the Union and in the defense and support of the Constitution. Northern, Southern, and Western interests ought to be forgotten or lost for the time being in the more noble desire to preserve the nation as one whole, for on this depends the security of all local and sectional interest. For if we cannot preserve them by supporting the Union, we cannot by rending it in pieces. In the former there is hope, in the latter fear, in one peace, in the other war. In times of peace, it ought to be our aim and our object to strengthen the bonds of the Union by cultivating peace and goodwill among ourselves. And in times of war, to meet our foes sword in hand and defend our rights at the expense of life. For what is life when freedom has fled? It is a name, a bubble. Far better to sleep with the dead than be oppressed among the living. All attempts on the parts of the religious aspirants to unite church and state ought to be repelled with indignation, and every religious society supported in its rights and in the exercise of its conscientious devotions. The Mohammedan, the pagan, and the idolater not excepted, and be partakers equally in the benefits of the government. For if the Union is preserved, it will be by endearing the people to it, and this can only be done by securing to all their most sacred rights. The least deviation from the strictest rule of right on the part of any portion of the people or their public servants will create dissatisfaction. That dissatisfaction will end in strife, strife in war, and war in the dissolution of the Union. It is on the virtue of the people that depends the existence of the government, and not on the wisdom of legislators. Wherefore serveth laws, it matters not how righteous in themselves, when the people in violation of them tear those rights from one another, which they, the laws, were designed to protect. If we preserve the nation from ruin and the people from war, it will be by securing to others what we claim to ourselves, and being as zealous to defend another's rights as to secure our own. If on this day the fathers of our nation pledged their fortunes, their lives, and their sacred honors to one another, and to the colonies which they represented to be free, or to lose all earthly inheritance, not life and honor excepted, so ought we to follow their example, and pledge our fortunes, our lives, and our sacred honors as their children and successors in maintaining inviolable what they obtained by their treasure and their blood. with holy feelings, sacred desires, and grateful hearts to our divine benefactor, ought we to perform the duties of this day and enjoy the privileges which, as saints of the living God, we enjoy in this land of liberty and freedom, where our most sacred rights, even that of worshiping our God according to his will, is secured unto us by law, and our religious rights so identified with the existence of the nation that to deprive us of them will be to doom the nation to ruin and the union to dissolution. It's now 62 years since the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, caused the proclamation to go forth among the people of the continents that the people of this nation should be free, and that over them kings should not rule and princes decree authority. And all this preparatory to the great work which he had designed to accomplish in the last days in the face of all people, in order that the Son of God, the Savior of the world, should come down from heaven and reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his ancients gloriously, according to the testimony of all the holy prophets since the world began. And it is 8 years, 2 months, and 28 days since this Church of the Last Days was organized by the revelations of that same Jesus, who is coming to reign before his ancients gloriously, then consisting of 6 members only. At its first appearance, excitement began to prevail among the people where it made its appearance, and as it increased in numbers, the excitement increased. The first attack made upon it by its enemies was by false representation, foul slander. By this engine it was assailed from every quarter, and by all classes of men, religious and unreligious. Misrepresentation followed misrepresentation. Falsehood after falsehood followed each other in rapid succession, until there must have been multitudes of them created in a minute by those employed in it, or else they could not have gotten so many put in circulation. This scheme not succeeding, the enemies had recourse to prosecutions, which were multiplied continually, apparently with determination to destroy every person who united to aid and assist in bringing forth the work of the Lord. But all this not succeeding, according to the expectations of the persecutors, they united to all this power, that of mobs, driving men, women, and children from their houses, dragging them out in the dead hours of the night, out of their beds, whipping, tarring, and feathering, and otherwise shamefully treating them. Nor were those means the only ones resorted to in this work of persecution, but being determined to put an end to the church forever, they added to all the rest of the means used, stealing the property of saints, also burning houses and charging it on the saints' heads, in order to raise public indignation against them, as also false swearing, and indeed we may add all other means which the adversary had in his power to use. Nothing seems to be left undone that could be done by men and demons, in order that the purposes of God might fail. But still the object, so much desired by many, has not yet been obtained. Under all this fire of persecution, the cause has rolled on with a steady course. The increase has been gradual but constant, and the church at this time numbers many thousands. Some in the old world have become obedient to the faith, multitudes in the Canadas as well as in most parts of the United States. During these scenes of persecution, a number of the saints have lost their lives, and others are missing, and it is unknown what has become of them, but the presumption is that they have been secretly murdered. No country of which we have any knowledge has offered so fair an opportunity for determining the great hostility which exists naturally in the human heart against God and against his work as this one. In other countries, persecutions were carried on under pretext of law. But in this country, where the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of every state in the Union guarantees unto every person the rights of conscience and the liberty of worshiping as he pleases, to witness such scenes of persecution as those which have followed this church from the beginning, in despite of law, justice, equity, and truth, and at war with the very genius of our republican institutions, and contrary to the spirit and design of our government, surely evinces the depravity of the human heart and the great hostility there exists in the heart of the human family against the work and purposes of God, and most fully confirms the apostle's saying that the carnal mind is enmity against God. But notwithstanding all this violence, we can say as Paul did to the Corinthians, we are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted but not forsaken, cast down but not destroyed. We have until this time endured this great fight of affliction and kept the faith. If the ancient saints had to endure as seeing him who is invisible, so have we. If they had to suffer the contradiction of sinners against themselves, so have we. If they had to undergo fears within and lightnings without, so have we. If they had to suffer stripes and imprisonments for their religion's sake, so have we. If they were often in journeyings, in perils of water, in perils among robbers, in perils among their own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness, so are we. If they had to commend themselves to God in much patience, in afflictions, in necessities, in distresses, in stripes, in imprisonments, in tumults, in labors, in watchings, in fastings, by pureness, by knowledge, by long suffering, by kindness, by the Holy Ghost, by love unfeigned, by the word of truth, by the power of God, by the armor of righteousness on the right hand and on the left, by honor and dishonor, by evil report and good report, as deceivers and yet true, as unknown and yet well known, as dying and behold they lived, as chastened and not killed, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing, as poor yet making many rich, as having nothing and yet possessing all things, so have we. If they went up through much tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb, so have we to go up through as great tribulation. And we trust in so doing we will also wash our robes and make them white in the blood of the Lamb. One cause of our heavy persecutions is the influence which those have in the world, whom we have separated from the fellowship of the church for their wickedness, who attempted to gratify their vengeance on us, and also to hide their own shame by foul slanders and base calumny. We were at one time represented by them as having all things in common, and another as being enemies to the government. And in other places we were reported to be abolitionists, and indeed anything they thought best calculated to stir up the public mind and to excite popular indignation, and if possible put an end to the work by sacrificing some of those who were considered as most active in supporting and defending the cause. But through the mercy of God, we are still in existence, and have the opportunity of joining with you in the privileges of this day. In assembling on this occasion, our object is not only to comply with the custom of our nation in celebrating the birthday of our liberties, but also to lay the cornerstones of the edifice about to be built in this place of honor of our God, to whom we ascribe the glory of our national freedom, as well as our eternal salvation, and whose worship we esteem of more consequence than we do the treasures of Missouri, ready at all times to offer unto him the sacrifice of our first fruits, and by untiring perseverance, patient industry, and faithful devotion to the cause of our God, rear this building to his name, designed for the double purpose of a house of worship and an institution of learning. The first floor will be for sacred devotion, and the two others for the purpose of education. The building to be 110 feet by 80, with 3 floors, and not far from 30 feet between the floors, all to be finished according to the best style of such buildings in our country. The entire expense, calculated at not far from $100,000, all when finished, to stand as a monument of the power of union of effort and concert of action. Next to the worship of God, we esteem the education of our children and of the rising generation. For what is wealth without society, or society without intelligence? And how is intelligence to be obtained? By education. It is that which forms the youthful mind. It is that alone which renders society agreeable and adds interest and importance to the worship of God. What is religion without intelligence? An empty sound. Intelligence is the root from which all true enjoyments flow. Intelligence is religion, and religion is intelligence, if it is anything. Take intelligence from it as what is left? A name, a sound without meaning. If a person desires to be truly pious in the sight of God, he must be purely intelligent. Piety without intelligence is fanaticism, and devotion without understanding is enthusiasm. The object of our religion is to make us more intelligent than we could be without it. Not so much to make us acquainted with what we do see as with what we do not see. It is designed to evolve the faculties, to enlighten the understanding, and through this medium purify the heart. It is calculated to make men better by making them wiser, more useful by making them more intelligent. Not intelligent on some subjects only, but on all subjects on which intelligence can be obtained. And when science fails, revelation supplies its place and unfolds the secrets and mysteries of the unseen world, leads the mind into the knowledge of the future existence of men, makes it acquainted with angels, principalities, and powers in the eternal world, carries it into heaven and heavenly places, makes it acquainted with God, its Redeemer, and its associates in the eternal mansions, so that when science fails and philosophy vanishes away, revelation, more extensive in its operations, begins where they, science and philosophy, ends, and feasts the mind with intelligence, pure and holy from the presence of God, tells of eternal mansions, of immortal glories, of everlasting dominions, of angelic throngs, of heavenly hosts, of flaming seraphs, of crowns of glory, of psalms of victory, of the saints' eternal triumph through a glorious resurrection, of songs of everlasting joy, of God the Father of all, of Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and of the blood of the sprinkling, which speaketh better things than that of righteous Abel. It not only acquaints us with these eternal things, but it makes known unto us the future history of man in time, of the purposes of God, which have to be accomplished before the end of all things comes. It warns and forewarns of the wars, the pestilences, the famines, the earthquakes, and the desolations which are coming on the earth, the rising and falling of nations, and also the desolation of the earth itself, the falling of the mountains, the rising of the valleys, the melting of the rocks, the purifying of the elements by fire, of the sun's veiling his face, the moon's turning to blood, the stars of heaven falling, of the heavens rolling away as a scroll, and of Christ descending from the heavens in a cloud, with the shout of the archangel and the trump of God, and of the wicked's fearing and trembling, of their faces gathering blackness, and of their seeking a refuge under the mountains, and of their calling upon the rocks to hide them from the face of him that sitteth upon the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand? All this mass of important intelligence, together with the final end of all thrones and dominions and principalities and powers and governments, which nothing else but revelation could make known, for science with all her powers could never declare it, neither could philosophy with her utmost stretch reach it. we obtain by our holy religion, for this is her province. It is the theater where she acts. It is the business we have for her. It is to tell us things which nothing else could tell. It is to fill us with that kind of wisdom which cometh down from above, and which is alone obtained by revelation, and by the powers which our holy religion confers, and by nothing else. In view, then, of what we have already obtained, and of what there is to be obtained, we've assembled ourselves together in this remote land, to prepare for that which is coming on the earth, and we have this day laid the cornerstones of this temple of God, and design with as little delay as possible to complete it, and to rear up to the name of our God in this city far west a house, which shall be a house of prayer, a house of learning, a house of order, and a house of God, where all the sciences, languages, etc., which are taught in our country in schools of the highest order shall be taught. And the object is to have it on a plan accessible to all classes, the poor as well as the rich, that all persons in our midst might have an opportunity to educate their children, both male and female, to any extent they please, so that all the talents in our midst may be called forth, in order that we may avail ourselves of all the means God puts into our hands, and put it into the power of all, to deliver themselves from the impositions and frauds which are practicing upon the more illiterate part of the community by those who have had superior advantages, or as far at least as learning can go to obtain this object. One part of the house shall be set apart for a place of worship, where we shall invoke our God for revelations, when we have gone as far as human learning can carry us, that by revelations, visions, etc., that we may fill the vacuum still left after science and philosophy have done all they can do, so that we may have that understanding and that wisdom which brings salvation, and that knowledge which is unto eternal life. That whether there are wars or famines or pestilences or earthquakes or distress of nations or whatever may come according to the purposes of our God, that we may know it beforehand and be prepared for it, so that none of these things shall overtake us as a thief in the night, and while we are crying peace and safety, sudden destruction come upon us. The Savior of the world himself, while he was here with his disciples, said that as it was in the days of Noah, so should it be at the coming of the Son of Man. They were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying and giving in marriage, and knew not, till the flood came and swept them all away. So shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. And Paul declared to the saints of his day, that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night, that when the people are crying peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, and they shall not escape. And that wicked men and seducers would wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. They will, says Peter, say, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Such is to be the state of the world at the most important period in the existence of man's earthly residence. The description given by Isaiah is tremendous in the extreme. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower. As with the taker of usury, so with the giver of usury to him, the land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled. For the Lord hath spoken this word. The earth mourneth and fadeth away. The world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth is also defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. The prophet Malachi, describing the same scene and the same period of calamity, says, For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burneth them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. The psalmist David, in the majesty of his prophetic power, has left us a warning also when he says, The mighty God, even the Lord, hath spoken, and called the earth from the rising of the sun to the going down thereof. Out of Zion the perfection of beauty God hath shined. Our God shall come, and shall not keep silence. A fire shall devour before him, and it shall be very tempestuous round about him. He shall call to the heavens from above, and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. And the heavens shall declare his righteousness, for God is judge himself. Having the knowledge of these things, and the voice of God being unto us, taken together, and making a covenant with our God by sacrifice, we have given heed thereunto, and affray here this day as witness for God, that he has not spoken in vain, neither has he said in vain. But the day and the hour of his judgment sleepeth not, neither do they slumber. And whether men believe or do not believe, it alters not the word which God has caused to be spoken. But come it must, and come it will, and that to the astonishment, the confusion, and the dismay of thousands who believe not. Neither will they regard until overtaken by it as a thief in the night, and sudden destruction come upon them, and there be none to deliver. Knowing therefore the terrors of the Lord, we warn our fellow men, not only by precept but example also, by leaving our former homes, to which we were bound by the strongest ties, suffering a sacrifice of the greatest share of our earthly possessions. Many of us in times past were rich, but for Jesus' sake and at the command of our God we have become poor, because he, Christ, became poor for our sakes. So in like manner we follow his example and become poor for his sake. And as Moses left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, and refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, having respect to the recompense of reward, so do we. We choose to suffer affliction with the people of God, rather than enjoy the flatteries of the world for a season. It is not because we cannot, if we were so disposed, enjoy both the honors and flatteries of the world, but we have voluntarily offered them in sacrifice, and the riches of the world also, for a more durable substance. Our God has promised us a reward of eternal inheritance, and we have believed his promise. And though we wade through great tribulation, we are in nothing discouraged. For we know he that has promised is faithful. The promise is sure, and the reward is certain. It is because of this that we have taken the spoiling of our good. Our cheeks have been given to the smiters, and our heads to those who have plucked off the hair. We have not only when smitten on one cheek turned the other, but we have done it again and again, until we are wearied of being smitten and tired of being trampled upon. We have proved the world with kindness. We have suffered their abuse without cause, with patience, and have endured without resentment until this day, and still their persecutions and violence does not cease. But from this day and this hour, we will suffer it no more. We take God and all the holy angels to witness this day, that we warn all men in the name of Jesus Christ to come on us no more forever. For from this hour we will bear it no more. Our rights shall no more be trampled on with impunity. The man or the set of men who attempts it does it at the expense of their lives. And that mob that comes on us to disturb it it shall be between us and them a war of extermination. For we will follow them till the last drop of their blood is spilled, or else they will have to exterminate us. For we will carry the seat of war to their own houses and their own families, and one party or the other shall be utterly destroyed. Remember it then, all men. We will never be the aggressors. We will infringe on the rights of no people, but we shall stand for our own until death. We claim our own rights and are willing that all others shall enjoy theirs. No man shall be at liberty to come into our streets to threaten us with mobs, for if he does, he shall atone for it before he leaves the place. Neither shall he be at liberty to vilify and slander any of us, for suffer it we will not in this place. We therefore take all men to record this day, that we proclaim our liberty on this day as did our fathers, and we pledge on this day to one another our fortunes, our lives, and our sacred honors, to be delivered from the persecutions which we have had to endure for the last 9 years, or nearly that. Neither will we indulge any man or set of men in instituting vexatious lawsuits against us to cheat us out of our just rights. If they attempt it, we say, woe be unto them. We this day then proclaim ourselves free, with a purpose and a determination that never can be broken. No, never. No, never. No, never. End of the oration delivered by Mr. Sidney Rigdon on the 4th of July at Far West, Caldwell County, Missouri, by Sidney Rigdon. General Smith's Views of the Powers and Policy of the Government of the United States by the Prophet Joseph Smith. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by James Bleckley. General Smith's Views. Born in a land of liberty and breathing an air uncorrupted with the sirocco of barbarous climes, I ever feel a double anxiety for the happiness of all men, both in time and in eternity. My cogitations, like Daniel's, have for a long time troubled me when I viewed the condition of men throughout the world, and more especially in this boasted realm where the Declaration of Independence holds these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But at the same time, some 2 or 3 millions of people are held as slaves for life because the spirit in them is covered with a darker skin than ours. And hundreds of our kindred, for an infraction or supposed infraction of some overwise statute, have to be incarcerated in dungeon glooms or suffer the more moral penitentiary gravitation of mercy in a nutshell, while the duelist, the debauchee, and the defaulter for millions and other criminals take the uppermost rooms at feasts, or, like the bird of passage, find a more congenial clime by flight. The wisdom which ought to characterize the freest, wisest, and most noble nation of the 19th century should, like the sun in its meridian splendor, warm every object beneath its rays. And the main efforts of her officers, who are nothing more nor less than the servants of the people, ought to be directed to ameliorate the condition of all, black or white, bond or free. For the best of books says, God hath made of one blood all nations of men, for to dwell on the face of the earth. Our common country presents to all men the same advantages, the same facilities, the same prospects, the same honors, and the same rewards. And without hypocrisy, the Constitution, when it says we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America, meant just what it said, without reference to color or condition ad infinitum. The aspirations and expectations of a virtuous people, environed with so wise, so liberal, so deep, so broad, and so high a charter of equal rights, as appears in said Constitution, ought to be treated by those to whom the administration of the laws are entrusted with as much sanctity, and the prayers of the saints are treated in heaven, that love, confidence, and union, like the sun, moon, and stars, should bear witness. Forever singing as they shine, the hand that made us is divine. Unity is power, and when I reflect on the importance of it to the stability of all governments, I'm astounded at the silly moves of persons and parties to foment discord in order to ride into power on the current of popular excitement. Nor am I less surprised at the stretches of power or restrictions of right which too often appear as acts of legislators to pave the way to some favorite political schemes, as destitute as intrinsic merit as a wolf's heart is of the milk of human kindness. A Frenchman would say, prosque tout aimer richesse et pouvoir. Almost all men like wealth and power. I must dwell on this subject longer than others, for nearly 100 years ago that golden patriot, Benjamin Franklin, drew up a plan of union for the then colonies of Great Britain that now are such an independent nation, which among many wise provisions for obedient children under their fathers' more rugged hands, thus they have power to make laws and lay and levy such general duties, imports, or taxes as to them shall appear most equal and just, considering the ability and other circumstances of the inhabitants in the several colonies, and such as may be collected with the least inconvenience to the people, rather discouraging luxury than loading industry with unnecessary burdens. Great Britain surely lacked the laudable humanity and fostering clemency to grant such a just plan of union, but the sentiment remains, like the land that honored its birth, as a pattern for wise men to study the convenience of the people more than the comfort of the cabinet. And one of the most notable fathers of our freedom and country's glory, great in war, great in peace, great in the estimation of the world, and great in the hearts of his countrymen, the illustrious Washington said in his first inaugural address to Congress, I hold the surest pledges that as on one side no local prejudices or attachments, no separate views or party animosities will misdirect the comprehensive and equal eye which ought to watch over this great assemblage of communities and interests. So, on another, that the foundations of our national policy will be laid in pure and immutable principles of private morality, and the preeminence of free government be exemplified by all the attributes which can win the affections of its citizens and command the respect of the world. Verily, here shines the virtue and wisdom of a statesman in such lucid rays that had every succeeding Congress followed the rich instruction in all their deliberations and enactments for the benefit and convenience of the whole community and the communities of which it is composed, no sound of rebellion in North Carolina, no rupture in Rhode Island, no mob in Missouri expelling her citizens by executive authority, corruption in the ballot boxes, a border warfare between Ohio and Michigan, hard times and distress, outbreak upon outbreak in the principal cities, murder, robbery, and defalcations, scarcity of money, and 1,000 other difficulties would have torn asunder the bonds of the Union, destroyed the confidence of man, and left the great body of the people to mourn over misfortunes in poverty brought on by corrupt legislation in an hour of proud vanity for self-aggrandizement. The great Washington, soon after the foregoing faithful admonition for the common welfare of his nation, further advised Congress that Among the many interesting objects which will engage your attention, that of providing for the common defense will merit particular regard. To be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. As the Italian would say, buono avviso, good advice. The elder Adams, in his inaugural address, gave national pride such a grand turn of justification that every honest citizen must look back upon the infancy of the United States with an approving smile and rejoice that patriotism in the rulers, virtue in the people, and prosperity in the Union once crowned the expectations of hope, unveiled the sophistry of the hypocrite, and silenced the folly of foes. Mr. Adams said, "If national pride is ever justifiable or excusable, it is when it springs not from power or riches, grandeur or glory, but from conviction of national innocence, information, and benevolence." There is no doubt such was actually the case with our young men at the close of the last century. Peace, prosperity, and union filled the country with religious toleration, temporal enjoyment, and virtuous enterprise. And gradually, too, when the deadly winter of the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, and other close communion acts of royalty had choked the growth of freedom of speech, liberty of the press, and liberty of conscience, did light liberty and loyalty flourish like the cedars of God. The respected and venerable Thomas Jefferson, in his inaugural address made more than 40 years ago, shows what a beautiful prospect an innocent, virtuous nation presents to the sage's eye, where there is space for enterprise, hands for industry, heads for heroes, and hearts for moral greatness. He said, "A rising nation, spread over a wide and fruitful land, traversing all the seas with the rich productions of their industry, engaged in commerce with nations who feel power and forget right, advancing rapidly to destinies beyond the reach of mortal eye. When I contemplate these transcendent objects and see the honor, the happiness, and the hopes of this beloved country committed to the issue and the auspices of this day, I shrink from the contemplation and humble myself before the magnitude of the undertaking." Such a prospect was truly soul-stirring to a good man, but since the fathers have fallen asleep, wicked and designing men have unrobed the government of its glory, and the people, if not in dust and ashes or in sackcloth, have to lament in poverty her departed greatness, while demagogues build fires in the north and south, east and west, to keep up their spirits till it is better times. But year after year has left the people to hope, till the very name of Congress or state legislature is as horrible to the sensitive friend of his country as the House of Bluebeard is to children, or Crockett's Hell of London to meek men. When the people are secure and their rights properly respected, then the four main pillars of prosperity, that is agriculture, manufacture, navigation, and commerce, need the fostering care of government. And in so goodly a country as ours, where the soil, the climate, the rivers, the lakes, and the sea coast, the productions, the timber, the minerals, and the inhabitants are so diversified that a pleasing variety accommodates all tastes, trades, and calculations, it certainly is the highest point of supervision to protect the whole northern and southern, eastern and western, center and circumference of the realm by a judicious tariff. It is an old saying and a true one: if you wish to be respected, respect yourselves. I will adopt in part the language of Mr. Madison's inaugural address: to cherish peace and friendly intercourse with all nations, having correspondent dispositions, to maintain sincere neutrality towards belligerent nations, to prefer in all cases amicable discussion and reasonable accommodation of differences to a decision of them by an appeal to arms, to exclude intrigues and foreign partialities, so degrading to all countries and so baneful to free ones, to foster a spirit of independence, too, just to invade the rights of others, too proud to surrender their own, too liberal to indulge unworthy prejudices ourselves, and too elevated not to look down upon them in others, to hold the union of the states as the basis of their peace and happiness, to support the Constitution, which is the cement of the Union, as well in its limitations as in its authorities, to respect the rights and authorities reserved to the states and to the people as equally incorporated with and essential to the success of the general system, to avoid the slightest interference with the rights of conscience or the functions of religion, so wisely exempted from civil jurisdiction, to preserve in their full energy the other salutary provisions in behalf of private and personal rights and of the freedom of the press, as far as intention aids in the fulfillment of duty, are consummations too big with benefits not to captivate the energies of all honest men to achieve them, when they can be brought to pass by reciprocation, friendly alliances, wise legislation, and honorable treaties. The government has once flourished under the guidance of trusty servants, and the Honorable Mr. Monroe to this day, while speaking of the Constitution, says, "Our commerce has been wisely regulated with foreign nations, and between the states, new states have been admitted into our Union. Our territory has been enlarged by fair and honorable treaty, and with great advantages to the original states. The states respectively protected by the national government under a mild paternal system against foreign dangers, and enjoying within their separate spheres by a wise partition of power a just proportion of the sovereignty, have improved their police, extended their settlements, and attained a strength and maturity which are the best proofs of wholesome law well administered. And if we look to the conditions of individuals, what a proud spectacle does it exhibit! On whom has oppression fallen in any quarter of the Union? Who has been deprived of any right of person or property? Who restrained from offering his vows in the mode which he prefers to the divine author of his being? It is well known that all these blessings have been enjoyed in their fullest extent. And I add with peculiar satisfaction that there has been no example of a capital punishment being inflicted on anyone for the crime of high treason. What a delightful picture of power, policy, and prosperity! Truly, the wise man's proverb is just. Sedoaka teromain goi vekasea de leumeim kamaut. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. But this is not all. The same honorable statesman, after having had about 40 years' experience in the government under the full tide of successful experiment, gives the following commendatory assurance of the efficiency of the Magna Charta to answer its great end and aim, to protect the people in their rights. Such then is the happy government under which we live, a government adequate to every purpose for which the social compact is formed, a government elective in all its branches, under which every citizen may, by his merit, obtain the highest trust recognized by the Constitution, which contains within it no cause of discord, none to put at variance one portion of the community with another, a government which protects every citizen in the full enjoyment of his rights and is able to protect the nation against injustice from foreign powers. Again, the younger Adams, in the silver age of our country's advancement to fame, in his inaugural address, 1825, thus candidly declares the majesty of the youthful republic in its increasing greatness. The year of Jubilee since the first formation of our Union has just elapsed. That of the Declaration of Independence is at hand. The consummation of both was effected by this Constitution. Since that period, a population of 4 millions has multiplied to 12. A territory bounded by the Mississippi has been extended from sea to sea. New states have been admitted to the Union in numbers nearly equal to those of the First Confederation. Treaties of peace, amity, and commerce have been concluded with the principal dominions of the earth. The people of other nations, the inhabitants of regions acquired not by conquest but by compact, have been united with us in the participation of our rights and duties, of our burdens and blessings. The forest has fallen by the axe of our woodsmen. The soil has been made to teem by the tillage of our farmers. Our commerce has whitened every ocean. The dominion of man over physical nature has been extended by the invention of our artists. Liberty and law have walked hand in hand. All the purposes of human association have been accomplished as effectively as under any other government on the globe, at a cost little exceeding in a whole generation the expenditures of other nations in a single year. In continuation of such noble sentiments, General Jackson, upon his ascension to the great chair of the chief magistracy, said, "As long as our government is administered for the good of the people and is regulated by their will, as long as it secures to us the rights of person and property, liberty and conscience, and of the press, it will be worth defending, and so long as it is worth defending, a patriotic militia will cover it with an impenetrable aegis." General Jackson's administration may be denominated the acme of American glory, liberty, and prosperity. For the national debt, which in 1815, on account of the late war, was $125 million, and lessened gradually, was paid up in his golden day, and preparations were made to distribute the surplus revenue among the several states. And that august patriot, to use his own words in his farewell address, retired, leaving a great people prosperous and happy, in the full enjoyment of liberty and peace, honored and respected by every nation in the world. At the age then of 60 years, our blooming republic began to decline under the withering touch of Martin Van Buren. Disappointed ambition, thirst for power, pride, corruption, party spirit, faction, patronage, perquisites, fame, tangling alliances, priestcraft, and spiritual wickedness in high places struck hands and reveled in midnight splendor. Trouble, vexation, perplexity, and contention mingled with hope, fear, and murmuring, rumbled through the Union, and agitated the whole nation as would an earthquake at the center of the earth, the world, heaving the sea beyond the bounds and shaking the everlasting hills. So in hopes of better times, while jealousy, hypocritical pretensions, and pompous ambition were luxuriating on the ill-gotten spoils of the people, they rose in their majesty like a tornado and swept through the land, till General Harrison appeared as a star among the storm clouds for better weather. The calm came, and the language of that venerable patriot in his inaugural address, while descanting upon the merits of the Constitution and its framers, thus expressed itself. There were in it features which appeared not to be in harmony with their ideas of a simple representative democracy or republic, and knowing the tendency of power to increase itself, particularly when executed by a single individual, predictions were made that at no very remote period the government would terminate in a virtual monarchy. It would not become me to say that the fears of these patriots have already been realized, but as I sincerely believe that the tendency of measures and of men's opinions for some years past has been in that direction, it is, I conceive, strictly proper that I should take this occasion to repeat the assurances I have heretofore given of my determination to arrest the progress of that tendency, if it really exists, and restore the government to its pristine health and vigor. This good man died before he had the opportunity of applying one balm to ease the pain of our groaning country. I am willing the nation should be the judge whether General Harrison, in his exalted station, upon the eve of his entrance into the world of spirits, told the truth or not, with acting President Tyler's 3 years of perplexity and pseudo-Whig Democrat reign to heal the breaches or show the wounds secundum artem, according to art. Subsequent events, all things considered, Van Buren's downfall, Harrison's exit, and Tyler's self-sufficient turn to the whole, go to show, as a Chaldean might exclaim, beram itai elau beshmayau gauha rauzin. Certainly there is a God in heaven to reveal secrets. No honest man can doubt for a moment, but the glory of American liberty is on the wane, and that calamity and confusion will sooner or later destroy the peace of the people. Speculators will urge a national bank as a savior of credit and comfort. A hireling pseudo-priesthood will plausibly push abolition doctrines and doings and human rights into Congress and into every other place where conquest smells of fame or opposition swells to popularity. Democracy, Whiggery, and cliquery will attract their element and foment divisions among the people to accomplish fancied schemes and accumulate power, while poverty driven to despair, like hunger forcing its way through a wall, will break through the statutes of men to save life and mend the breach of prison glooms. A still higher grade of what the nobility of nations call great men will dally with all rights in order to smuggle a fortune at one fell swoop, mortgage Texas, possess Oregon, and claim all the unsettled regions of the world for hunting and trapping. And should an humble, honest man, red, black, or white, exhibit a better title, these gentry have only to clothe the judge with richer ermine and spangle the lawyer's fingers with finer rings to have the judgment of his peers and the honor of his lords as a pattern of honesty, virtue, and humanity, while the motto hangs on his nation's escutcheon, every man has his price. Now, O people, turn unto the Lord, and live, and reform this nation. Frustrate the designs of wicked men. Reduce Congress at least one half. 2 senators from a state and 2 members to 1,000,000 of population will do more business than the army that now occupy the halls of the national legislature. Pay them $2 and their board per diem, except Sundays. That is more than a farmer gets, and he lives honestly. Curtail the offices of government in pay, number, and power, for the Philistine lords have shorn our nation of its goodly locks in the lap of Delilah. Petition your state legislatures to pardon every convict in their several penitentiaries, blessing them as they go, and saying to them in the name of the Lord, go thy way and sin no more. Advise your legislatures, when they make laws for larceny, burglary, or any felony, to make the penalty applicable to work upon roads, public works, or any place where the culprit can be taught more wisdom and more virtue, and become more enlightened. Rigor and seclusion will never do as much to reform the propensities of man as reason and friendship. Murder only can claim confinement or death. Let the penitentiaries be turned into seminaries of learning, where intelligence, like the angels of heaven, would banish such fragments of barbarism. Imprisonment for debt is a meaner practice than all the savage tolerates with all his ferocity. Amor vincit omnia. Love conquers all. Petition also, ye goodly inhabitants of the slave states, your legislators to abolish slavery by the year 1850, or now, and save the abolitionist from reproach and ruin, infamy and shame. Pray Congress to pay every man a reasonable price for his slaves out of the surplus revenue arising from the sale of public lands and from the deduction of pay from the members of Congress. Break off the shackles from the poor black man and hire him to labor like other human beings. For an hour of virtuous liberty on earth is worth a whole eternity of bondage. Abolish the practice in the army and navy of trying men by court-martial for desertion. If a soldier or marine runs away, send him his wages with the instruction that his country will never trust him again. He's forfeited his honor. Make honor the standard with all men. Be sure that good is rendered for evil in all cases, and the whole nation, like a kingdom of kings and priests, will rise up with righteousness, and be respected as wise and worthy on earth. and as just and holy for heaven by Jehovah, the author of perfection. More economy in the national and state governments would make less taxes among the people. More equality through the cities, towns, and country would make less distinction among the people. And more honesty and familiarity in societies would make less hypocrisy and flattery in all branches of the community. An open, frank, candid decorum to all men in this boasted land of liberty would beget esteem, confidence, union, and love. And the neighbor from any state or from any country, of whatever color, clime, or tongue, could rejoice when he put his foot on the sacred soil of freedom and exclaim, "The very name of American is fraught with friendship." Oh, then create confidence, restore freedom, break down slavery, banish imprisonment for debt, and be in love, fellowship, and peace with all the world. Remember that honesty is not subject to law. The law was made for transgressors, wherefore a Dutchman might exclaim, "Ein ehrlicher Name ist besser als Reichtum." A good name is better than riches. For the accommodation of the people of every state and territory, let Congress show their wisdom by granting a national bank, with branches in each state and territory where the capital stock shall be held by the nation for the mother bank, and by the states and territories for the branches, and whose officers and directors shall be elected yearly by the people, with wages at the rate of $2 per day for services, which several banks shall never issue any more bills than the amount of capital stock in her vaults and the interest. The net gain of the mother bank shall be applied to the national revenue, and that of the branches to the states and territories' revenues. And the bills shall be par throughout the nation, which will mercifully cure the fatal disorder known in cities as brokerage, and leave the people's money in their own pockets. Give every man his constitutional freedom, and the president full power to send an army to suppress mobs, and the states authority to repeal and impugn that relic of folly which makes it necessary for the governor of a state to make the demand of the president for troops in case of invasion or rebellion. The governor himself may be a mobber, and instead of punished, as he should be, for murder and treason, he may destroy the very lives, rights, and property he should protect. Like the Good Samaritan, send every lawyer, as soon as he repents and obeys the ordinance of heaven, to preach the gospel to the destitute, without purse or scrip, pouring in the oil and the wine. A learned priesthood is certainly more honorable than a hireling clergy. As to the contiguous territories of the United States, wisdom would direct no tangling alliance. Oregon belongs to this government honorably, and when we have the red man's consent, let the Union spread from the east to the West Sea. And if Texas petitions Congress to be adopted among the sons of liberty, give her the right hand of fellowship, and refuse not the same friendly grip to Canada and Mexico. And when the right arm of free men is stretched out in the character of a navy for the protection of rights, commerce, and honor, let the iron eyes of power watch from Maine to Mexico and from California to Colombia. Thus may union be strengthened and foreign speculation prevented from opposing broadside to broadside. 70 years have done much for this goodly land. They have burst the chains of oppression and monarchy, and multiplied its inhabitants from 2 to 20 millions, with a proportionate share of knowledge, keen enough to circumnavigate the globe, draw the lightning from the clouds, and cope with all the crowned heads of the world. Then why, oh why, will a once flourishing people not arise, phoenix-like, over the cinders of Martin Van Buren's power, and over the sinking fragments and smoking ruins of other catamount politicians, and over the windfalls of Benton, Calhoun, Clay, Wright, and a caravan of other equally unfortunate law doctors, and cheerfully help to spread a plaster and bind up the burnt, bleeding wounds of a sore but blessed country. The Southern people are hospitable and noble. They will help to rid so free a country of every vestige of slavery whenever they are assured of an equivalent for their property. The country will be full of money and confidence when a national bank of 20 millions and a state bank in every state with 1 million or more gives a tone to monetary matters and makes a circulating medium as valuable in the purses of the whole community as in the coffers of the speculating banker or broker. The people may have faults, but they should never be trifled with. I think Mr. Pitt's quotation in the British Parliament of Mr. Prior's couplet for the husband and wife to apply to the course which the King and Ministry of England should pursue to the then colonies of the now United States might be a genuine rule of action for some of the breath-made men in high places to use towards the posterity of this noble, daring people. Be to her faults a little blind, be to her virtues very kind. We've had Democratic presidents, Whig presidents, a pseudo-Democratic Whig president, and now it is time to have a President of the United States. And let the people of the whole Union, like the inflexible Romans, whenever they find a promise made by a candidate that is not practiced as an officer, hurl the miserable sycophant from his exaltation as God did Nebuchadnezzar, to crop the grass of the field with a beast's heart among the cattle. Mr. Van Buren said in his inaugural address that he went into the presidential chair the inflexible and uncompromising opponent of every attempt on the part of Congress to abolish slavery in the District of Columbia against the wishes of the slave-holding states, and also with a determination equally decided to resist the slightest interference with it in the states where it exists. Poor little Matty made this rhapsodical sweep with the fact before his eyes that the state of New York, his native state, had abolished slavery without a struggle or a groan. Great God, how independent! From henceforth slavery is tolerated where it exists, constitution or no constitution, people or no people, right or wrong. Vox Matti, vox diaboli. The voice of Matty, the voice of the devil, and peradventure his great sub-treasury scheme was a piece of the same mind. But the man and his measures have such a striking resemblance to the anecdote of the Welshman at his cart tongue that when the Constitution was so long that it allowed slavery at the capital of a free people, it could not be cut off. But when it was so short that it needed a sub-treasury to save the funds of the nation, it could be spliced. Oh, Granny, what a long tail our puss has got. As a Greek might say, hysteron proteron, the cart before the horse. But his mighty whisk through the great national fire for the presidential chestnuts burnt the locks of his glory with the blaze of his folly. In the United States, the people are the government, and their united voice is the only sovereign that should rule, the only power that should be obeyed, and the only gentleman that should be honored at home and abroad, on the land and the sea. Wherefore, were I President of the United States of the voice of a virtuous people, I would honor the old paths of the venerated fathers of freedom. I would walk in the tracts of the illustrious patriots who carried the ark of the government upon their shoulders with an eye single to the glory of the people, and when that people petitioned to abolish slavery in the slave states, I would use all honorable means to have their prayers granted, and give liberty to the captive by paying the Southern gentleman a reasonable equivalent for his property, that the whole nation might be free indeed. When the people petitioned for a national bank, I would use my best endeavors to have their prayers answered, and established one on national principles to save taxes, and make them the controllers of its ways and means. And when the people petitioned to possess the territory of Oregon or any other contiguous territory, I would lend the influence of a chief magistrate to grant so reasonable a request, that they might extend the mighty efforts and enterprise of a free people from the east to the west sea, and make the wilderness blossom as the rose. And when a neighboring realm petitioned to join the union of the Sons of Liberty, my voice would be, come. Yeah, come Texas, come Mexico, come Canada, and come all the world. Let us be brethren. Let us be one great family, and let there be universal peace. Abolish the cruel custom of prisons, except in certain cases, penitentiaries and court-martials for desertion, and let reason and friendship reign over the ruins of ignorance and barbarity. Yeah, I would, as the universal friend of man, open the prisons, open the eyes, open the ears, and open the hearts of all people to behold and enjoy freedom, unadulterated freedom. And God, who once cleansed the violence of the earth with a flood, whose Son laid down his life for the salvation of all his Father gave him out of the world, and who has promised that he will come and purify the world again with fire in the last days, should be supplicated by me for the good of all people. With the highest esteem, I am a friend of virtue and the people, Joseph Smith, Nauvoo, Illinois, February 7th, 1844. End of General Smith's views of the powers and policy of the government of the United States by the prophet Joseph Smith.